Good morning and welcome everyone to the third session of the Hub online series, Emerging Technology and Business Models in a COVID World. It's so great to see so many people here today, and we've had over 500 registrations now for the series, which is awesome. And thank you so much for joining us today on what is a beautiful day in Wellington. Before we go any further though, I'd just like to make it clear that the speakers will not have time for questions today. So if you do have any questions, please put them up on the platform and we will then send them on to the speakers at the end of the session so they can be answered. So please feel free to put them on, but we won't have time during the session to answer those questions. Also, there's a feedback tab on the platform. If you've got any feedback, please drop us a note, let us know what you think of the session today and beyond. But before we go any further, I'd like to thank our sponsors for the series. We have our principal sponsor, Swift, ACI Worldwide, Buddle Finlay, and the Middleware Group as our series sponsors. Thank you so much for those organisations to support the series. It's been really, really appreciated and very, very helpful. So let's run through the agenda today, just so as you know what you're in for, which is a pretty exciting lineup, I must admit. I'll first be going to Tom Goodwin. Now, he's the founder of All We Have Is Now, which is a business transformation consultancy and an author as well. And Tom will join us shortly. We then have a local speaker with international credentials, Dave Corbett, CEO of werFinance, and he will be talking about a new fintech platform that they are launching. And then we'll close that off just before 10 o'clock and you can get on with the rest of the day. So let's kick it off and let's introduce Tom Goodwin. As I said, he's joining us from the USA and he's the founder of All We Have Is Now, which is a business transformation consultancy and also author of Digital Darwinism, Survival of the Fittest in the Age of Business Disruption. Great title, Tom, like it. Now, Tom's been voted the #1 voice of marketing on LinkedIn globally, not once, not twice, but 4 times, which is really impressive. He's got over 700,000 followers. And the Business Insider also named him one of the 30 people that you should follow. So Tom, I'm sure you'll get a few more followers after this session as well. So Tom's role is to understand technology, consumer behavior and culture, and then create solutions that take advantage of these new opportunities. I'd like to welcome Tom. And today he'll be talking about emerging technologies and new business models that the payments industry should be looking out for, and then also we'll discuss different ways in which to approach innovation. Welcome, Tom. Thank you so much for beaming in all the way from the US.
Thanks very much for having me, Steve, and welcome to everyone in New Zealand and beyond. This is going to be a very fast-paced presentation and unapologetically slow because there's so much going on in the world. It's important to try and give you the full width. But you will be getting copies of this presentation and you will have the chance to ask me questions, whether it's in a few days' time over the internet or in another forum. So hopefully you can see my slides on the display at the moment. So I'm going to talk about the emerging technology in the world right now and what does it mean? Okay. As Steve discussed earlier, I tried to make sense of the changing world. I tried to look with width rather than depth. I tried to look into the future. And in particular, I tried to look at people and how people's behaviors are changing. What is the meaning of this technology rather than the technology itself? And I tried to be quite provocative. I tried to agitate companies into thinking and doing stuff very differently. So it's a kind of fun role based around creating a lot of energy. I am responsible for the annoying quote that will have littered your LinkedIn feeds at some point on the left. I started writing for lots of publications. Then I wrote a book all about how you would conceive and create a company if you'd never known how to do it before. To some extent, our memory and our assumptions tend to limit what we dream is possible. Now, first of all, I want to contextualize this moment in time. And the use of the word unprecedented right now is unprecedented. We are somewhat certain that we've never seen things like this before, that this was all to be unexpected. And that's not really true. I mean, when you actually look at many of the changes in the world right now, things like the rise of e-commerce, things like the death of department stores, things like the rise of groceries being bought online. These are all long-term trends that have happened before. The notion that somehow this is an unprecedented time in retail bankruptcies just isn't really true. Working from home has been a long-term trend as well. We've seen an acceleration, but this is not in any way unexpected. The growth of online learning has happened all across the planet, both in the Southern Hemisphere, in China, the US, the UK, and things like telehealth have been talked about as the future for quite some time. Even things like online events. I mean, it's a pretty typical thing to see the growth of, and the rise of streaming entertainment has not caught us flat-footed, one would presume. So I think we have to be quite careful. We have to try and be fairly calm in these times and try and make sense of a changing world. I mean, it's also the case that in this age where contactless technology is very much at the forefront of people's minds and people are worried about touching things, you know, the decline of cash has been long predicted, and whether it's globally in almost every market in the world, or whether it's in New Zealand itself, you know, the rise of digital payments has been a long-term trend. But somehow everyone seems quite shocked by this. There does seem to be this weird sense that e-commerce is this unexpected and new thing. People almost act as if they thought the internet was going to go away. The move towards having customer service being done in remote call centers was something that companies weren't very well prepared for. Some very large companies, Burlington is an extremely large clothing company in the US, sort of worth over $15 billion, and they simply never got around to building out an e-commerce function. So I think the real learning of this period of time is not quite how unexpected things were, but quite how expected things were, but our lack of preparation for them. And I think it's only really in retrospect that you can see that perhaps we focused on the wrong things. Perhaps we got a bit distracted by things which felt a bit more gimmicky almost. I mean, we were sort of obsessed with this idea that the drones were going to deliver things to us, or that robots would take over jobs in banks. So we thought that voice would be a big deal, or the Internet of Things would change everything, or 3D printing, or chatbots, or 5G. And actually, we kind of focused on the things that took the headlines rather than the little moments that matter. You know, the little moments like this, and there's probably quite a lot of personal details you can steal from me here, but our decision about what payment to use is no longer as significant as it once was. For a while, the feeling of bringing out a credit card in a restaurant and the clunkiness of the metal was a sign of status, and people would think about the decisions about how they would pay for things. And increasingly, these decisions are becoming automated for us, and it's just whatever default options we have in our computers. Increasingly, the way that we may choose a payment system is also somewhat different. So I myself use my American Express card more, simply because it's the only card that you can get in the US readily that has contactless payment. And the few seconds and the piece of delight that comes from swiping it quickly are way more important to me than the miles I might earn on an airline. And we have to be mindful of new customer expectations and new behaviors. And these are not just things for the young. We somehow feel that digital solutions and seamless UIs and beautifully designed apps should somehow be there for urban millennials or for Gen Z, but actually all manner of people across all demographics now expect to have very seamless, quick interactions. If they can see where their Uber is in real time, if they can watch any film ever made, if they can listen to any radio station on the planet, if they can have currencies converted from one to the other on TransferWise free of charge, we kind of are much less forgiving, I think, of the complexity that companies face. And we're much more demanding and much more impatient. And it's really this that we should be focused on. So rather than thinking about the drones or the 5G connectivity, be much more aware of contemporary consumer expectations. Now, we're in this very odd period of time where I think we're in this kind of messy interim. Because every time a new technology comes along, that's particularly profound. There's always these two stages to any new technology. The first one is where we kind of embrace it enthusiastically, and we use it somewhat like oil to kind of lubricate and to augment what we already have and what we already do. We're going to sprinkle it like garnish on everything that we currently do. And then there's the second stage, and this happens a little bit later on. It might take 10, 20, or 30 years. And it's that period of time where we build what we should have done in the first place around the possibilities of that technology and new consumer behaviors that we see with that technology. And there is this awkward and sort of messy and complicated and unprofitable and chaotic interim. And that's kind of what we're feeling, I think, in the world right now. This is quite a traditionally true thing. I mean, the advent of steam power took a long time for people to really understand what it meant for transportation and how it would change factories. We had format wars with electricity when electricity was invented. We probably forget this now, but there was a long period of time where Macs and PCs just didn't talk to each other. You were either in one camp or the other, and software was very hard to interoperate between the two. So that complexity is normal, and the way that we augment things is also very normal. So if we look at money, for example, we've gone from cowrie shells to coins to paper money to sort of promissory notes to digital promissory notes, and now we have sort of payment layers built on top of that. And we now have a kind of future where versions of Bitcoin and other sort of cryptocurrencies, which will be discussed later on, are adding further complexity to this. But while we're obsessed with this idea that every technology disrupts and it cannibalizes the old technology, that's not normally the case. Normally what happens is we add to what we've had before. So right now, pretty much everywhere on the planet, you can pay with all of these mechanisms, apart from maybe the cowrie shells. But it's an incredible amount of complexity that we now feel. And that's why consultants love to have diagrams like this, kind of showing how messy and how complicated and how fragmented things are, because we really are in this mid-digital age where everyone's trying to fight for investment, everyone's trying to fight for customers, everyone's trying to fight for press headlines, and there probably will be few winners in this process. Now, there are, I believe, perhaps three ways to use digital stuff. And I use the word digital stuff because it's much easier to think of it as a concept rather than as a sort of technology. It's much better to think of it as a frame of mind, as a canvas of opportunities, more than it is to be specific about it. I think there are three ways that people can use it. One is to take an existing company and digitalize. Another is to digitally transform. And another is to digitally create. And I will explain the differences between these. So digitalization is to be much more surface level. If you imagine companies are like onions with kind of concentric layers that are built atop each other. At the very core of a company is it's got a business model. It's sort of reason to exist. It's kind of core role in people's lives. And because of that business model, it'll make some products or services. And then with those products or services that it now needs to market, it will find ways to price them, ways to distribute them, ways to serve customers. And on the very outermost layer will be the communications layer. So this will be the PR, this will be the advertising, this will be everything from search engine optimization to owned media like websites. And it's the comms layer that people most readily see. That's the outermost layer that really is the most sort of physical and tangible interface that you have with a company. Now, to digitalize is to take the outermost layers and apply technology to them. Now, this is a surface level transformation. It's pretty cheap. It's pretty easy. It's not particularly risky. And more than anything else, it's very politically easy. If you run, for example, Burger King and you want to start placing their TV ads on YouTube, that doesn't involve many people from Burger King to get involved in that process. So that's digitalization, and that's what we most often see. Digital transformation is the opposite. It's to go to the very core of a business. Why does it exist? What should that business model be today? How should it make money? How does it delight consumers? What assumptions in the industry can it challenge? And it will probably affect the product as well. But it doesn't tend to be demonstrated so much in the marketing or the communications because the business model itself is inherently disruptive. So Uber doesn't need to do particularly interesting advertising. Airbnb doesn't need to market in a particularly wild and crazy way because it's the business model and the fundamental economics behind it, which are radically different. Now, to digitally transform and to get a company that has made money from doing something already, that has recruited people around that business model, that has a culture of optimizing for that business model, to get those people to change is extremely difficult. One, it's extremely risky. Two, it's extremely slow. It's normally extremely expensive. And more than anything else, it's very politically hard. You know, you will have a culture of people that were very good at working with the old core competency. You will have a business case that shareholders are bought into that was reliant on an old business model. So it's extremely politically difficult. And digital creation is by far the easiest, and that's just to create a brand new entity from scratch. And it's quite bizarre because these days it really is easier to build than it is to change. It's far quicker and cheaper to build a brand new tech stack for a bank than it is to get a bank with legacy systems to change. It's probably about 50 to 100 times cheaper and probably about 5 times quicker. It's an extraordinary realization. So those are the 3 models. Some examples of them. So digitalization, if you've got a retailer and you stick an iPad in it, but you don't change anything about your inventory, you don't change how you make money, that's digitalization. If you stick a robot in a bank and do nothing with the systems underneath it, you do nothing with the way that you make money, it's just a great photo shoot for a PR op. It's a great way to put something in your annual report, which makes it look like you get technology. I actually think the Apple Card is a bit of an example like this. It's a wonderful new UI layer, but on what is an inherently old system. It's a great way to pay your bills, but you're still reliant on chip and pin. This card doesn't even have NFC. And America is sort of full of examples of this. For some reason, America's obsessed with checks still. So you're now able to print your checks at home using your own printer. You're able to deposit checks by taking photographs of your check. You're able to send an e-check, which means that someone else prints it for you and sends it for you. These are patches on old business models. Digital transformation is much harder to find examples of. Netflix is a good example. They went from being a DVD delivery business to an entertainment company that streamed all of its materials. And probably the second of 3 examples in the entire world ever is Microsoft, which has slowly reoriented itself around openness. It started charging for access rather than charging to own the software itself. But digital transformation has remarkably few success stories. But digital creation is where it gets really exciting. Digital creation is where people can use their imagination, people can build from scratch, people can serve customer needs that are developing, and more than anything else, people can do things which kind of challenge consumptions. For me, digital creation is very much about building what you should have, knowing everything you know now. And it's building with technology and new technologies at the very core. So data strategies work, the structure of your company is oriented around people. And more than anything else, these companies are built with new customer expectations at mind. So it realizes that modern consumers don't quite know what role a bank is supposed to play. New consumers have different relationships with different types of companies. New customers are very impatient. So some good examples of this, there's a company called Robinhood, which has completely changed the entire way that a generation have thought about investing in stocks because they've made it incredibly easy, incredibly fun, and there's all sorts of complexity behind the scenes, and there's all sorts of regulations that they go close to. But as a customer, it's made investing very fun and very easy. There's a company like Klarna, which I'm sure you all know extremely well, but it's completely challenged the assumptions about payments. It's made it very easy as a retailer to plug into their system and to change the way that you accept payments. But as a shopper, it started to own the customer interface, and it started to become a destination app that people use in order to buy things. And a company like Shopify is a completely different way to think about retail. You know, a company like Walmart, a company like Carrefour, a company like Woolworths, even eBay, they never really came close to making something that was so open and accessible and a sort of platform that could scale like that. I'm very wary of time, actually. So here are some provocations for the future to leave you with. The first is to challenge assumptions. The horrible irony of being extremely good at our jobs is that we tend to become expert, and we slowly become wise, and we slowly become experienced, and we slowly think we know what people want, and we think we know what can be done, and we think we know what makes money and what doesn't. And therefore we become very narrow in our focus. And occasionally you see companies like Lemonade. So this is a contents insurance company that exists in America and it exists in the UK. And it's completely changed the relationship that you have with insurance. For so long, insurance has been predicated on the idea that you take as much money as you can from people and hope they never make a claim. And you make sure it's difficult to make a claim. You make sure you pay out slowly, and you make sure you deny as many claims as possible, but hopefully not to annoy people too much. Lemonade uses the iPhone's camera app, and you record video testimonials. And the idea is that, one, people are less likely to lie if they have to record a video testimonial. And two, the idea is it has within it a form of artificial intelligence, which can look at how your skin is changing and how your eyes are dilating and figure out if you're lying or not. If you make a claim and it deems that you are making an honest claim, it pays you back within about an hour. Completely different way to think about insurance, rooted in behavioral economics, rooted in completely challenging all of the assumptions that the industry is based on. The other weird thing about the modern age is that we tend to find that our competition comes from weird directions. So BMW have been very ready to fight Mercedes. They've been very ready to fight lesser brands like Toyota, and increasingly they've been ready to fight companies like Tesla. But if you live in an urban environment, then perhaps Google Maps and it's showing you how to use public transport is now a threat. Perhaps people not owning a car and just using Ubers, perhaps people just using Bird scooters is now a competition. And we're not very well set up to look at competition that comes from the past. We're not very well set up to look at competition that will enter our future. We tend to look at our competitor set in the past. And we also tend to look at our competitor set as being in the same industry. And all of a sudden you realize that competitors can enter from anywhere. There are huge battles for the customer interface. So our relationship for a long time has been with the end provider. You know, if we watch TV, we would pick the channel. If we listen to music, we would think about the band or the record label. If we watched the news, we'd think about the paper that published it. If we bought stuff, we would buy a brand that we loved. We would have a relationship with our bank. We would choose travel based on airlines or hotel chains that we had relationships with. The brand of supermarket, the brand of hotel, the brand of grocery store would all matter to us. And increasingly, these sort of aggregators and these platforms and these sort of well invested in tech companies are becoming the companies that own our relationship. So now our decision architecture is changing, and often stuff just bubbles in through this customer interface. And there will be huge battles in the future, even greater than we've seen so far, to try and own the relationship with the customer. Who can build up the greatest user base, who can get the most data on people, who can offer them the most reliability, who can gain their trust, and who can keep on jumping on top of each other to become the owner of the interface with you. It could be Instagram, it could be Klarna, it could be Shopify. It's very hard to know. As you all know, the open banking regulations in the EU and spreading around the world is actually completely changing the way that we should really think about payments, and that we should really think about banking, and we should think about insurance companies. We're effectively seeing a sort of ecosystem of integrations and data callouts. And if anyone remembers the kind of early thinking about Web 2.0, where what we see becomes a system of instructions that pull data from different places, that's now starting to be the kind of promise of the future. One, this means that people can swap to another provider extremely quickly. But two, it means that the value that you can offer people becomes wildly exciting. So your product really becomes a sort of architecture of pulling things through from different places. So how can you add your own slant to that? How can you build a branded environment where what becomes quite commoditized actually feels different? I think there's enormous potential for companies to really get excited about the opportunity of these more holistic customer solutions. One particular thing that they can do is something that I call privacy trading. For a long time, we've kind of assumed that privacy was there and that people would guard it at all costs. And we should tiptoe around people and try to sort of extract as much information as we could from people and hope that they didn't notice. I think when we think of it differently and we actually explain to people why we're accessing their data, and when we give them something of enormous value, there's actually really big opportunities in this space. I'd love to see some companies within the financial services and payments and banking space really kind of embrace the power of the data they have to offer better solutions. One tiny little example is a health insurance company that's based in, I think, the UK, whereby understanding how much activity you've done, it can offer you cheaper health insurance. This is either a massive privacy invasion or it's something that people are quite happy about. I would probably guess for most of their customers, it's the second. American Express now know when you've arrived in a place. And rather than you freaking out, hopefully it now starts to earn your trust by showing you something it can do of value in return for that. So one, I expect it to decline your transactions with a lower frequency, but two, it can start making suggestions about what to do. And that makes me realize there's some new loyalty plays. For a long time, loyalty was about being a member, or it was about buying loyalty with sort of financial rewards or for points or for miles. And actually, it's interesting to start to think about what loyalty can really mean. How do you create a sense of belonging? How do you create a sense of community? There's a mobile network in Europe called giffgaff, which is based around feeling like you belong to a group of people. There's huge opportunities to elevate the role that you have in people's lives. This is very Silicon Valley, but a company like Peloton, which is about fitness, has now decided it's about happiness. Casper, rather than being a mattress company, is now a sleep company. WeWork is not just an office, it's a way for a better life. And while these things feel a bit silly, I think there is a huge opportunity as companies that are part of one of the most trusted and intimate relationships in our whole life to elevate the role. What happens if a bank becomes the guardian to all of your personal finances? Why can't a payment company be a company that looks after your financial wellness? Or perhaps it could be the company that knows everything that you own and helps you make decisions about what to buy next. I think I've got two more things to leave you with. The world is becoming incredibly democratized in the creation of media, but also in commerce. No disrespect to all of these companies here, but it's now incredibly easy to set up a company. You know, the ability to target advertising, the ability to build your own marketing tech stack, the ability to get funding, the ability to go global. It really is an extraordinary place for competition. And this competition is in all directions. And I think anyone who's not paranoid at all times about the fact that someone can come in, scale more quickly than you've ever believed, own more user interfaces than you ever imagined, that's something everyone should be thinking about. So what kind of moats can you create to defend yourself against this? And just finally, and these things are normally 1 hour presentations by themselves, but the entire world is becoming shoppable. You know, we used to have to go to stores. Now everything around us is a store. You can be on a ski lift in Switzerland and decide to change bank account. You can be bored in a dentist lobby and decide to buy a cactus just by using the AR lens with Google. I think often we think that our job is to kind of create more meaningful experiences. It's to impart delight. But I think increasingly our job is to get out of the way, to add some value and just make it easy for people. Now is a great time to really be thinking about the what that you make. So knowing everything you know about the modern world, knowing everything you know about the COVID environment, knowing everything you know about what tech makes possible, how can you rethink the products and services that you make? How can you serve these evolved needs better? And how do you become really customer-centric in what you do? And just finally, it's also good to think about the way that you work. You know, we are now in an environment where more people are working from home. That actually means that recruitment can operate differently. We can now start to craft jobs around exceptional people. Now diversity and an incredible culture of collaboration is essential. Now people can do side gigs. They don't need to work full time. We probably need to rethink some of the KPIs that we use in this environment. So we're now in this weird time. Everything feels quite strange. All of the assumptions we've made from the past are now being subverted. No one knows what's going to happen in the future. But I love this quote: when everything is uncertain, anything is possible. So that's why I named my company All We Have Is Now, because I do think in this time of chaos and turbulence, this is an incredible opportunity to be a bit more bold, be a bit more imaginative, and above all else, be a bit more urgent and to go out and make things happen. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Tom. That was fantastic. And thank you with that closing message about this is a time of opportunity and a time to be bold. Which I think is a great way to end that address. And thanks also for condensing it into a relatively short period of time. Really appreciate it. Really like your reference around digital as a frame of mind. I think that was really useful. And getting that balance of experience with that challenge assumptions as well, I think was really useful. Owning the interface for the customer who is more demanding and more impatient is a real challenge for all of us here today. So thank you very much. Go and have a great rest of the day, and you will get some questions coming through, I'm sure, and you will have a few more followers just to get that 700,000 up to the mil mark, which should happen over the next year or so. Thank you, Tom. Great, thank you. That was really, really interesting. And now I'd like to introduce our second speaker for today, Dave Corbett, who is the CEO of werFinance. Now, Dave is a former PwC financial services partner, both in Auckland and in London, and was the founder and leader of their Market Value Direct, which was PwC's global financial instrument valuation business. And Dave is here today to tell us about a very new and exciting development that he's bringing to the New Zealand market. Certainly over the 20 years of experience, Dave, you've got the reputation of being incredibly innovative and a strategic leader and thought leader in finance. And it's a privilege for us to have you here today to address the industry. You're a financial engineer with degrees in law and financial economics. So great credentials. Now, Dave, welcome. Dave's going to talk to us today about a new fintech platform that he's launching and how that's going to transform the financial sector and the opportunities that are available to the market, small businesses, and the consumer as well. So, Dave, pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Steve. I really appreciate that. That's a very kind introduction. And so thank you to both you and Payments New Zealand for giving us an opportunity to share the werFinance story and introduce what we're doing in New Zealand. I think that where Tom ended up was a great start for me. When everything is uncertain, anything is possible. Today, we're going to be talking through the werFinance platform and what that enables and empowers people to do. Towards the end, I'm really excited to be able to announce a world first for New Zealand, which is the Power Dollar, and to talk about what that will enable going forward. So a great place to start is, who is werFinance? So we're a courageous New Zealand-owned fintech, and we're helping Kiwi businesses and communities improve their customer experiences. That's the core of everything we do. When we look at our purpose, it's really about empowering the communities and innovators to invent the future of finance. What do we mean by that? Well, when we look at the problem that we're trying to solve, we're really saying that finance has become disconnected from the rest of the customer experience. And that, in some cases, takes away from an overall positive customer experience. What we want to do is make it easy for New Zealand businesses and communities to complete their customer experiences and to re-embed finance back into the overall experience. Pardon me. So what are we doing? We're actually making it easy to complete the experience. What the core of it is the Power Finance platform. It's a flexible platform for innovation. We're also making it so that the costs that people incur as they dip their toe into the waters of building finance into their non-finance businesses are only going to grow with their own success. Those upfront costs are removed. It's really important to our DNA that we do things safely and responsibly, and so compliance and safety are built into the technology that we've built. And we're really making sure that innovation going forward is not going to be constrained by legacy systems, but really only by the imagination of the innovators who want to interact with it. I'd love to give you a practical example of what that means. So this is that example. So we're comparing what it's like today in the top line and then what it could look like with Power Finance and our platform. So if you're a small retail business in New Zealand, the problem you might be facing is my revenue is low for this month. And what does that mean? I don't have enough money to pay my bills this month. I need to find someone to lend me my money. Often a really awkward time. You're trying to grow your business and make sure that it's getting back on an even keel. Many people are feeling this in COVID times, as I'm sure you know. But unfortunately, that's the time where you have lots of paperwork and you need to use your personal assets often as collateral to square that circle and get the money you need to pay the bills. What we see and how this can work going forward with Power Finance platform is to integrate the finance into the experience they're already having. So we see a future where your point of sale system for the small business actually notices that your revenue is low. It understands what your historical cash flows were and stock levels. And actually it goes as far as to offer you a loan when you need it. If you accept that, and then your business can continue to thrive and you can focus on making sure that your business is healthy in the real world and not being distracted with the admin of finance. To make this work, you need a couple of key features, and those are smart money, smart identity, and smart contracts, and those are three key pillars of our Power Finance platform. What that enables and gives you is it means that the compliance can be built in. We can move from having high upfront costs and to actually costs that grow as you grow. And also we can really deliver the promise of having an innovation-rich platform where fintechs can interact and we can really move the dial on innovation and finance. The key part that I'm going to come back to later in the presentation is the smart money piece, and that's what our Power Dollar is the key component that we're announcing today. A really good question that I often get is, well, so who are your customers and who are you focusing on? So our customers are often the businesses or communities that we're interacting with. They in turn have their own customers. What we're all about is helping them be the hero in our story. There's really three customer groups that we've got. Therefore, one is the commercial customer, and they're focused on increasing profitability and completing the customer experience. So they already are selling typically some experience or good to the customer, but they've left the financing of that experience or that good to others to do. It's too hard for them to get into that space. And we know that people want to complete customer experiences. And when companies get very big, so if you think about large automotive companies, they often have a finance arm associated. But for typical New Zealand businesses, it's just too hard until now to really complete the customer experience and embed the finance into the offering. The other set of customers we're really focused on, and I'm personally proud of the advances we've made there, is our community customers. What we found is that there's groups of New Zealanders who are in a niche and live their life according to sets of values that aren't necessarily being directly addressed by mainstream financial services. These are faith-based groups. They're also ethnicity-based groups, particularly in New Zealand, iwi and Maori, or they're sets of people who've got beliefs around the environment and sustainability. they're looking to make sure that the financial services that they're consuming are 100% aligned with their goals and values. Our Power Finance platform also enables those communities to tailor and build financial experiences that meet those niches. And lastly, but also really importantly, fintechs. Really, we're a channel to market for them so they can bring their, for example, Aho, who are digitizing Whakapapa and making Whānau and Hapu and Iwi a relevant digital identity. They can bring that to our customers, and we're a channel to market for them. But in turn, they make their ecosystem stronger and they enrich it. So we're really excited to really prioritize them and make sure they can deeply engage in this future of finance. So the benefits for our customers that we're looking to deliver, Steve, is low barrier to entry. We want to make it easy to use our developer tools. We want to make sure, and this is truly important, that compliance and safety are built in. We're talking about the money supply, the banking system, doing this responsibly and safely is the top priority. Cost has to scale with the business growth. We need to make it easier to get into the game and to innovate in the space. And really, this is part of a global trend, but we're really talking about embedding finance to make sure that customer experiences are complete and that we're not leaving the personal admin on the table to frustrate our customers. So the really exciting thing that we're announcing today and proud to share is the Power Dollar. This is a key plank of our platform. It sits along our digital identity. We call that smart identity, and also the smart contract framework. It's really having a programmable money supply that allows a business like Power Finance to exist. It allows us to add up the small volumes from all of our Power partners together so that collectively we can operate at scale and deliver things at a cost point that is lower than or at worst the same as existing financial service providers. What we're announcing today is in fact world leading, and I'm hugely proud of that. What we're doing here is we're launching a responsible program money supply that Kiwi business communities can courageously and safely use to improve their customer experience. We had to build it in our case, and we think that this is going to give New Zealand a chance to have another FPOS moment and take a leap forward in what the future of finance is. I've said a few times already in the presentation that what we're doing here is about safety and responsibility. And you can really see that in the features of how we've crafted the Power Dollar. This is a programmable money supply that enables the future of finance, but in a super safe way. The first thing to really note is that every Power Dollar is always one-to-one backed by New Zealand dollars. When we looked at what was happening in the advent of programmable money, we saw people often asking the questions, but where is my money and is it real? Those are totally reasonable questions, and we wanted that answer to be as strong and responsible as possible. So our answer is it's always backed by a New Zealand dollar. And where is it being held? In our case, and this is a really exciting piece, is that the traditional New Zealand dollar backing each Power Dollar is being held safely by the New Zealand government. That holding by the New Zealand government means that it's the lowest risk place for that New Zealand dollar to be held in New Zealand. It's really important that they're touching the money and nobody else, and making sure that, that we have high integrity throughout. But the real magic comes to life when you add together that contribution from the sovereign with our contribution, which is some leading patented technology. And we're connecting that with that deposit with sovereign. And really that's where the programmable money comes to life, and we can enable the future of finance. I have this little diagram to try and put it in context. I appreciate that I'm deeply into the world of programmable money and not everyone else is. You would have started the following this, no doubt, with what is a cryptocurrency. Look, cryptocurrencies are, if I was going to draw an analogy, they're a little bit like a pokey machine compared to what we've built here, which is an ATM. So on the one hand, it's got a screen, it's got a keyboard, it's got some integrated circuits inside. But you put $1 inside cryptocurrency and you may get $1 back, or you may get many dollars back, and you will have some fun along the way, no doubt. What we're doing, as I say, is more akin to an ATM. It's probably less fun, but much more reliable in that you put $1 in, you get $1 back. This linking to what's called fiat or traditional money is the key to that. And there's been a whole branch of new currencies and programmable money supplies launched down that branch of programmable money. When we started our journey here 2 years ago at ParaFinance, actually some of these categories didn't even exist yet, but this is what the state of the world is today. The first thing that happened after cryptocurrencies was the idea of tethers. And that's a situation where, like us, it's one-to-one backed, almost always. Little exclamation mark there, not always, but almost always, one-to-one dollars backed and held in an account. But the thing that we don't like about tethers at ParaFinance is that the dollar is being held in a trading bank. And we think that that's not the best solution available for New Zealanders and New Zealand, because that introduces credit risk into the system, meaning if the bank falls over for whatever reason, then their dollar that's being held there isn't as safe as it could be. That's why we think sovereign backing to digital currencies is the most responsible way forward. And really, it's that other branch to this diagram that I want to just delve into. There's sort of two things here. Central bank digital currencies, there's a massive global trend around that. Most people would have heard about the digital renminbi, which is the Chinese central bank digital currency that is an extended trial of 14 million people at the moment. Also the e-krona from Sweden. Even last week, the president of the European Central Bank hinted very strongly that a future of a digital euro was a possibility that they should be ready to launch at the appropriate time. The actual truth is that many central banks around the world are having varying degrees of private or public experiments and thinking in relation to central bank digital currencies. And I find that very exciting. And at ParaFinance, we're ready to integrate with those when they come available. But we didn't want to wait for that to come available in New Zealand because we want to move forward quickly and have our FPOS moment and explore this future of finance where we can embed it into customer experiences. On that basis, we had to build our own. And so that's why we've got a public-private sovereign-backed digital currency. So unlike a central bank digital currency, where both the backing is from the sovereign and the technology is offered by the sovereign, in this case, the technology comes from the private sector, from ParaFinance. But similar to a central bank digital currency, the dollar still represents a dollar held by the government. And we think that that's something we shouldn't compromise on because that's the safety and integrity that we need to build the future of finance. And so really what we're doing at the moment is working with our foundation customers who are excited and courageous to change the future of finance. We will continue to look and want to partner with New Zealanders who are interested in what we're doing here and want to be empowered. And our question that I want to leave you with, Steve, and for all the participants today is, are you the hero in our story? And are you ready to be empowered in the future of finance?
Thank you, Dave. That is a great question to finish on. And all I'm going to say is thank you so much for sharing your journey with the industry today and launching what is an outstanding platform with ParaFinance and also the Power Dollar as well to enable that. So changing the future of finance is really what you've shared with us today. And as a world leading and world first, big congratulations to you and the team for getting this to market, and also best wishes for a successful growth path. Looking forward to seeing how that emerges. So thank you so much for coming here today. And those that have been watching, please shoot through questions for Dave. It's a bit mind-blowing in terms of what you've just described to us, but equally very, very exciting and very exciting for the New Zealand financial sector and payment sector as well.
Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate the opportunity today, and I appreciate seeing Payments New Zealand continued support of innovation in the sector. It's fantastic.
Right. Awesome. Thank you, Dave. You have a good day.
You too.
Thank you very much. Just want to close off with a few comments. Thanks again to Tom and to Dave for speaking here today. Tom leaving the message of now is a time to embrace the opportunity and be bold. And Dave just showing you what that means in reality with the launch of the ParaFinance platform and the Power Dollar as well. A great example of New Zealand innovation within the payment sector. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope you found it useful. I certainly have. It's been really valuable. And thank you so much again for our sponsors for the series. Principal sponsor Swift, and the series sponsors ACI Worldwide, Buddle Finlay, and Middleware Group. Now, we have 2 more sessions left in the series. They will both be on Tuesdays at 9 a.m, so the same time as today. And our session next week is going to focus on the future importance of interoperability for economic recovery. And we have 3 speakers joining us next week. Jeff Bascan, Deputy Governor from the Reserve Bank. He will share his views on where the priorities and expectations are over the next coming period as we work through that economic recovery. Julie Boland, who's Head of Payments Markets Oceania at Swift, and Jane of Payments New Zealand, who will be back to talk about and share the Payments Modernisation Plan discussion document and see how you can get involved in that. So please join us next week. It's a really good lineup and a really interesting topic to do. As I said, the speakers will be taking questions, so please, if you haven't already, ask those questions on the platform, and we'll make sure that that gets to the speaker and we get answers back to you. We hope that you'll join us again next week, and please go and have a really enjoyable balance of the day. Thank you for coming along.